What's going on, YouTube? Today I am going to answer the question that literally nobody has asked me. Why do I have all of these airplanes tattooed on my arm? It's going to be a little bit of a different video. I wasn't able to make it out to the airport this weekend. We had some personal things come up with my mother-in-law and her house and estate that we had to take care of. So it's Sunday night. I'm filming this sort of last minute, but I'm going to go through each one of these airplanes, tell the story of it, why it's there, why it was special. If you're interested, stick around. We're going to start at the wrist and we're going to work our way up. So the first airplane we have right here is a Pitts SC-1. That is a biplane, fully acrobatic aircraft. They were built between the 90s, 2000s. Awesome little airplanes. They're tiny. They're like a Miata of the sky. They fly 200 miles an hour. Like I said, they're fully acrobatic. I've had the pleasure of working on one or two of these. The reason it's on my arm, though, is it's my personal favorite airplane of all time. If I can ever own an airplane or build an airplane, it's either going to be a Hatch Classic, which is very similar to a Pitts but bigger, or a Pitts SC-1. However, they're very expensive, so quite a ways away from ever being able to afford to do that. Airplane number 2 right here is a Piper J3 Cub. That's just another one that I really like. It's a very well-known airplane that everybody in general aviation has probably had some time in, or at least been around at an air show. They're really fun, super bare bones, nothing in them. I have a lot of experience working on the small 12-foot wing Pipers between the Pacer, the Tri-Pacer, the Cub, the J3, J4, and I realize it's a different manufacturer, but the Aeronca Champ and even the American Champion Decathlon, I've worked on all of those. I really like those airplanes. I've always had a lot of fun flying in them with clients, so that one had to go on there. Moving up, this one right here, I'll stand where you can see it, is a Mooney M20J. That is my second favorite airplane of all time. If I'm ever able to buy an airplane, I would like to have a Mooney. They are fast, they are fuel efficient. Personally, I like working on them. I know a lot of people don't like working on them, but I've worked on a dozen or so different Moonies, J's, K's. I've worked on a couple of Bravos. I've even worked on a Mooney, I want to say it was a Mooney C. It was super early, so I love those airplanes. I had to put that on my arm. This one right here is a T-34. This was a very long-term project that me and my buddy Darren, who's also an IA, did. The owners had requested a glass cockpit, so we actually went through this airplane and we put a Dynon 10 and a Dynon 6-inch screen in the front panel and a Dynon 10-inch screen in the back panel as well. So we did a full glass cockpit. However, about, I'd say 75% of the way through that project, me and a deer had a disagreement of who was supposed to occupy the space in a lane of travel while I was on a motorcycle, and I was unable to finish that because I had broke a collarbone, but that one was a lot of fun. I still help my buddy Darren with that airplane occasionally when he needs help with it. So that one had to go on my arm. Let's see. This guy right here, that is an Ercoupe. That is E-R-C-O-U-P, Ercoupe. Those are very old airplanes. They were designed in the 40s. And one of the unique things about them was they were designed as an airplane that anyone could fly, and it was supposed to be like a car. So you can actually take the wings off here, and it's only 8 feet wide, so it fits in a standard lane of travel. It has one brake pedal. It does not have rudder pedals. The rudders are tied into the main controls. So when you bank left with the ailerons, there's a special joint in the back of the aircraft that automatically applies the rudder for that condition of turn. They were really cool little airplanes. It's one of the first airplanes I got to work on as an A&P out there at a little air park called San Geronimo here in San Antonio. So again, that's another fun one that I really enjoyed, so I threw that one on there. This guy right here, stand up where you can see it, is a Cessna 150. I put the Cessna 150 on there. This was my first one, I should add. This was my first one. I got this one 6 years ago. I got these other ones about a year and a half ago, and then I got the rest of them probably about a half a year to a year ago. But the Cessna 150, that was the first airplane I ever flew. It was also the first airplane I ever worked on. So when I started all this, I put that airplane first. And originally this was not what I wanted to do. I put an airplane on my arm to see if I was going to be allergic to the ink or have a reaction to it. And then somehow over time I was like, well, I'll just put some more airplanes on there. And it ended up being a full sleeve covering my arm. And now when I say full sleeve, I mean covering my arm, but obviously it's not filled in with clouds or anything. Let's see, this one right here, this is a Piper Lance. It looks almost identical to a Cherokee 6 or a Saratoga has a tapered wing. But anyways, that 6th place Piper PA-32, very similar fuselage to the Cherokee. Get a little closer, you can see it right there. That's a fun airplane. It has a T-tail on it. That's another airplane that I really like. If I was ever going to go on a trip, or if I was ever going to go cross-country, I would probably want to do it in a Piper Lance. This guy right here, it's the one that's facing the different direction from all the others, which is par for that airplane, because that is a Velocity. That is one of Burt Rutan's Canard design experimentals. It has a turbocharged 550 from a Continental in there. Flies about 230 miles an hour. Very, very, very fast. I've only got to work on one of these once, but I love Canard airplanes. Another one of my favorite large airplanes would be a Beechcraft Starship. If you've never seen a Beechcraft Starship, look that up. It's a really cool airplane. Never sold very well, and eventually Beechcraft scrapped it, but it is a Canard. This is obviously a lot smaller 4-place version called a Velocity. That had to go on my arm. The last single engine, this guy right here, is a Piper PA-28 pick. Piper PA-28, 140, 160, 180, Arrow, Archer, Warrior, they're all the same. And that catches a lot of argument in the A&P community when you say that an Arrow is the same as a Cherokee 140, but it's essentially the same skeleton. The only thing that changes is the wings and retractable gear in the engine, or the windows are shaped a little different, but they're the same airplane. This is one of the airplanes that I specialized on when I first started working in aviation. I worked on a lot of these. So I don't know everything there is to know about Piper Cherokees, but I do know almost everything there is to know about Piper Cherokees, and I've spent probably a good 5 or 6 years working on those. Just a fun little airplane. So I had a little bit of space here that nothing else would fit in. I said, you know what? Let's throw a Cherokee on there. Okay, that was the last of the twins. Moving up to the upper arm, I tried to go with all twin engine airplanes up here. This guy right here is the Beechcraft Baron. That was another big project we did at work. They had, well, there's actually 2 Barons that I've worked on. The second one was a full strip down. They redid the interior, they repainted it. We had helped put it back together and got that one back up in the air. But this was an airplane that I worked on when I first got my A&P. Now this is the distinction. First airplane I ever worked on was the Cessna 150. First airplane I ever worked on as a certificated A&P was a Beechcraft Baron, a P-58. And that, it's since faded, went through the end of a fence in Stinson Airport. It had the pilot had overshot the runway, slid off the end of the runway, went through a fence. So the windshield was all busted, the wings were torn up, the props were mangled. So we were putting new wings on it, we were putting new engines on it, and we were replacing the windshield. And that was my marriage to aviation, because a piece of plexiglass split my finger open from the bottom knuckle all the way up to the top knuckle. And that scar has since faded. If I get it close, you might be able to see just a little tiny piece of it. But that was not fun at all. That was one of my first experience working as an A&P, and I learned that plexiglass, when broken, is very, very sharp. Let's see. Let's go over here. This airplane right here is a Beechcraft Duke, another Beech. I always called that one the Dookie. I hate that airplane. I hate it with a passion. The cowling takes 4 people to remove. We worked on one in my career. There were 74 unairworthy discrepancies. The owner basically told us, well, the other mechanic said it was fine. And we ended up returning this airplane to the owner as unairworthy with a very long list of discrepancies. But I hated it. I put it on the inside of my arm. Keep it a little bit closer to me, as always a reminder to never let things go, shall I say. To always hold true to my values, stick to the book, stick to how it's supposed to be done. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to let a pilot take an unairworthy airplane and kill themselves. So that one went on there, but on the inside of my arm. This guy right here, I'll just show you that one. That is a Cessna 414. That's actually one of my wife's favorite airplanes. We used to work together. There's a whole story on that. But one of our clients was a crop duster. They had a 414. And the unique thing about a 414 is it does technically have a bathroom in it, but what Cessna calls a bathroom is a 2-gallon bucket with a toilet seat on the top of it. So nobody ever actually uses it, but that's another fun one that I put on there because we, again, did a lot of work to that one. Let's see if I can show it to the camera, though. This one right back here. Hopefully you got that. That one right there is a Piper Geronimo, also known as a PA-23 160. Got to work on a few of those in school when I got my A&P from St. Philip's College. And then the flight school I worked at actually had one. It was a really, really nice one. So I got a lot of experience with that airplane. I always liked that airplane because it's from the 60s, but people always think it's a lot newer than that. They always think it's from the 90s or from the 2000s, and I have to tell them, no, that airplane's actually a 1964. But anyways, that was that one. And then the last one I put up here is a Beechcraft King Air 200. If you don't know what a Beechcraft King Air 200 is, if you've ever seen the movie Jurassic Park 3, that is the airplane that they crash in the beginning of the movie when they run into, I think it's not the T-Rex. They throw somebody in front of the plane and then they crash it, and it's great. But we had an owner who used to come through pretty regularly at the airport. We would always put air in his tires, service the struts, little things like that for him. Just made sure that the airplane was, looking good for him. One day he comes in and the gear doors were sort of bent where it looks like something had hit the gear doors. So we actually took some different sheet metal tools and we straightened that back out and had it cold worked to where it wasn't going to bind on anything so that he could take it back to the Beechcraft Service Center to get it repaired the right way. And although it wasn't a lot of work, it was the first big airplane that I got to work on. After that, when we moved to a different airport, I ended up getting to mess a little bit with a Boeing 727 and some other things. But at the time, that was the biggest airplane that I had worked on. So I thought, you know what? We'll put that one on the top of my arm because I got the room for it. And that pretty much completed the sleeve. I didn't have any room left over. I've worked on hundreds of airplanes over my career. I obviously can't put hundreds of airplanes on my arm. So those are the ones I did. At any rate, if you liked the video, if you thought this was kind of interesting, if you like the stories or you want to know more, make sure to leave a comment and I'll try to answer it. Like the video, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see y'all in the next one. Be easy.